form so that these kinds of things are prevented from happening again. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. We now go to the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Chaffetz.
And thank you, Chairman. I would say to the ranking member, Mr. Cummings, who I have the utmost respect for in every way, shape, or form, I totally concur with you. We, too, just like the ARB, should have unfettered access to all the information, all the witnesses, and all the documents. We as a committee should stand up for ourselves and demand that all the unclassified documents be released so we all can look at them at the same time, at the same thing. So,
would the gentleman yield for 5 seconds?
Sure.
I agree. I yield back.
Thank you.
Yeah, one. Like basketball. Huh?
Mr. Nordstrom, it's pretty clear for me, from the October hearing that there were a number of security recommendations that you wanted to see done on the ground. At any time during your service there, did you ever get everything that you wanted? Were the recommendations that you were making forward, were you actually able to implement those security recommendations?
Very few of them.
Very few of them. Mr. Hicks, is it fair to say that the people on the ground trying to make the security decisions, that they were not able to get the resources, they weren't able to fortify the facility, they didn't have the personnel that they requested? Is that fair to say?
Yes, it's fair to say.
When I saw Secretary Clinton 4.5 months after the attack in Benghazi testify before the United States Congress that she didn't make the security decisions, you made the security decisions, Mr. Nordstrom. You're the regional security officer on the ground. You were the chief security person. You're the ones that made the security decisions. True or false?
The response I got from the regional director when I raised the issues that we were short of our standards for physical security was that my, quote, tone was not helpful.
So true or false? The security decisions on the ground in Libya were made by you.
I would have liked to have thought, but apparently no.
Mr. Hicks, when you heard and saw that, did you have a reaction to it? What's your personal opinion?
When I was there, I was very frustrated by the situation, at times even frightened by the threat scenario that we were looking at relative to the resources we had to try to mitigate that threat scenario.
And to the leadership of this committee on both sides of the aisle, I find it stunning that 4.5 months after the attack, Secretary Clinton still has the gall to say, it wasn't us, it was them. I take full responsibility, but I'm not going to hold anybody accountable, but it was them that made the decisions. That was not the case. I yield to the gentleman from Ohio.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Nordstrom, you testified in October there were 200 and some security incidences in Libya the 13 months prior to the attack. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Repeated attempts to breach the facility there. You repeatedly asked for additional security personnel, and it was denied, correct?
That's correct.
Not only denied, but it was reduced, correct?
That's correct.
And then 4.5 months after it all happens, the Secretary of State says, you were responsible for the security situation in Libya. That's what we have. That is exactly what we have. You repeatedly asked, send us some more of the good guys. They said, we can't do it. In fact, we're going to take some of them away. You guys are on your own. They made that decision in Washington. In fact, Mr. Nordstrom, the hearing ended in October. The only hearing we had last fall before an election, hearing ended with you referring to the folks in Washington, your superiors, who wouldn't give you what you needed, you referring to them as the Taliban. Is that correct?
Yes.
Remember that? Can you remember that statement you made?
Yeah, I've had a lot of questions about that metaphor.
Understand. But for them to say now you're responsible for the security situation flies in the face of fact. I yield back to the gentleman.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Chairman, one of the things I see in the Accountability Review Board, page 37, that I just find, first of all, I want to highlight, quote, Embassy Tripoli staff showed absolute dedication and teamwork in mobilizing to respond to the crisis with the DCM, and then it goes on there, naming you specifically for your heroism and for your work. That's what I saw. I could see it in your eyes, and I could see it in the others. God bless you for the great work that you did. But the next paragraph, Mr. Chairman, I have a real problem with. It says, in the third sentence, the board found no evidence of any undue delays or decision-making or denial of support from Washington or from the military combatant commanders. And as we've heard here today, that is not true. And the next sentence is the most troubling. Quite the contrary, the safe evacuation of all U.S. government personnel from Benghazi 12 hours after the initial attack. That's not true. There are 4 people that were not safely evacuated. And at the very beginning of the ARP, it says, quote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." I think that's true. We always have to remember them. And we can't allow this ARB to say that everybody was safely evacuated, because they weren't. But there was an awful lot of heroism.
I thank the gentleman. That's so true. We now go to the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Maloney.
Thank you, and I agree with Mr. Chavez completely that there should be equal exchange of information, that we should have access to all information. But the Democratic minority was denied access to a witness. The only way we knew anything about what Mr. Thompson was going to say was what we read in the press. Now, there should be equal access to witnesses, and there should be equal access to information.
Would the gentlelady yield?
On your time. May I?
Well, hold the clock, because you made an allegation I don't understand. We didn't have a transcribed interview with 2 out of the 3 witnesses. Mr. Thompson was not made available to either. Mr. Nordstrom was, in fact, a previous witness, and we felt that there was sufficient information about what he felt. And Mr. Hicks, I think you went through 5 hours on a bipartisan basis. We forwarded their statements, not ours, their statements. We participated not at all in preparation. We forwarded them to the minority as we got them, period. So I'm a little bit concerned only in that there's nothing fair about partisan politics, but I believe we've fully complied deliberately with the spirit of the rules all along. So I would hope the gentlelady, when better informed, would appreciate that we tried to be very forthcoming. Now, remember, these are whistleblowers.
Mr. Chairman, I'm all for equality, and we did get copies of Mr. Hicks's statements and Mr. Nordstrom. But your staff met with Mr. Thompson. Our staff was not allowed to meet with Mr. Thompson.
He's represented. It's just not true.
You didn't meet with him?
No, it's true that we have had some meetings with him, but we haven't prohibited or in any way. He's not our witness.
Would the gentlelady yield?
He's
Absolutely.
a whistleblower that came forward.
Yeah, let me. I'm so glad we are stopping the clock. You all stopping the clock, right? We need to clear this up.
Well, I don't think there's anything to clear up.
No, I'm
These
just
are whistleblowers.
Yeah, and we want to protect whistleblowers. That's very, very important to us. The first thing, we have not gotten a syllable from, you've had conversations with Mr. Thompson. We've never had a conversation with Mr. Thompson. I see you looking over here, Mr. Gowdy, and you know that's not fair. And so so all I'm saying to you is that we have a witness that came in here today that you had an opportunity to interview.
Well, I appreciate that.
And we never had that opportunity.
Well, you know what? Stop the clock for 1 second. One quick question. I'm asking the witnesses. Mr. Thompson, is it your decision who you talk to, and did any of my people ever tell you not to talk to the Democratic minority?
And I'm not accusing you of that.
No.
Okay. Mr. Hicks, have we ever suggested that you not talk to the minority, any of their people?
No.
Mr. Nordstrom, has anyone on my staff or any of my members ever asked you not to speak to them?
No, in fact, I spoke with both sides.
Thank you. That's resolved. The gentlelady may continue.
Well, we did request to meet with Mr. Thompson, and through his lawyer, he said no. But he did speak to the Republican staff. I'd like to go back to Mr. Chavez's or other people's questioning about Cheryl Mills's phone call. And reading the transcripts of it, Mr. Hicks, you told our investigators that she did not seem happy when she heard that no other State Department official was in the classified briefing. Is that true?
She was unhappy that her minder, the lawyer that came with Congressman Chaffetz, was not included in that meeting.
Was she unhappy that no other State Department official was included? Just that State Department official?
That State Department
Okay.
official.
And you also said that she never criticized you, and according to your interview transcript, you said she never gave you any direct criticism. Do you stand by that statement today?
The statement was clearly no direct criticism, but the tone of the conversation, and again, this is part of the Department of State culture, the fact that she called me and the tone of her voice, and we're trained to gauge tone and nuance in language, indicated to me very strongly that she was unhappy. And it just,
okay,
if I may...
my time is limited. Going to the diplomatic post in Benghazi, as I understand it, the British ambassador's convoy was attacked, a gentleman was killed, and they decided to pull out of Benghazi. Is that correct?
I don't believe anyone was killed. I believe we saved the life of one of those people.
But he was
I'd like
shot.
to defer to Eric because he was actually the RSO
the point,
there.
my question is, did the British ambassador close the post in Benghazi and leave?
He did.
He did. Do you
If I
think
could
it was
clarify
wise?
for that, though,
Excuse me, claiming my time, I will yield if somebody wants me to yield, but I wanted to ask, when we continued to stay there, do you think that was a wise decision for us to continue to stay in Benghazi after the English had closed their post and left?
Absolutely.
Why was it important for us to stay in Benghazi?
We needed to stay there as a symbolic gesture to a people that we saved from Gaddafi during the revolution. As we know, Gaddafi's forces were on the doorstep of Benghazi right before the NATO bombing commenced. And as a gesture, again, as I said before, Chris went there to be, as a symbolic gesture, to support the dream of the people of Benghazi to have a democracy.
And so he shared your position that staying there was incredibly
And he
important.
also understood from the Secretary herself that Benghazi was important to us and that we needed to make it to be a permanent constituent post.
Now, I agree with my good friend on the other side of the aisle, Trey, that it was a long time before the FBI got on the ground. And as I understand it from a report that they gave us, they got the visas right away. The day of the Ambassador Rice's appearance on the Sunday shows, September 16, the Libyan government granted the FBI the visas so that the team could travel to Libya. Their flight clearance was granted the following day on September 17th, and the FBI arrived in Tripoli on September 18th. And according to this report, the team could not travel to Benghazi for some time due to the security situation on the ground. Is that true? Were all of our people out of Benghazi, and were we not letting anyone in Benghazi? What exactly was happening then, Mr. Hicks?
Yes, the Libyan government did not want any of our personnel to go to Benghazi because of the security situation there.
So when the FBI went to Benghazi, it was when the Libyan government felt that it was secure enough for them to go there. Is that a fair statement?
We strung together a series of approvals at the mid to upper levels from the government and organized a military escort to go with the FBI and Special Forces troops that escorted them as well.
Thank you. The gentlelady's time has expired. We now go to her friend, Mr. Trey Gowdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am trying to reconcile how Benghazi was not safe enough for the Federal Bureau of Investigation to go, but it was safe enough to leave a below-spec facility for our diplomats to stay in. I'm just trying to reconcile those 2 points. It's too dangerous for the Bureau, who are trained law enforcement officials, but it's just fine for diplomats. At some point, I'll reconcile that. Let me do this, Mr. Hicks. I'm going to dust off something called the best evidence rule. The best evidence of what you said when you were asked about Mr. Chaffetz's visit is actually what you said. So here it is. Those instructions were to arrange the visit in such a way that Representative Chaffetz and his staff would not have the opportunity to interview myself, John Martinic, and David McFarland alone. That's what you said in a deposition. So there shouldn't be any ambiguity about who said what when. That's your testimony. Now, I'd like to try to weave this tapestry together because this will be the last opportunity I have certainly today to talk to you. If I understand your testimony correctly, Mr. Hicks, and I want to be fair about it, so if I mischaracterize anything, you need to correct me. if I understand your testimony, in part, the ambassador was interested in going to Benghazi because of interest that Secretary Clinton had in Benghazi. Is that fair?
That's fair.
All right. Now, Mr. Nordstrom, same thing to you. And if I'm unfair in my characterization, you need to correct me. I thought I understood your testimony to be that Secretary Clinton alone was able to approve facilities that were below specs.
That's correct, part of the specs. There's two categories, SECA and OSPB. She is the only one that can authorize waivers for SECA. In this case, both apply because we didn't meet either.
So we are able to show that in part he went to Benghazi because of Secretary Clinton, in part Benghazi was still open despite the fact it was below specs because of Secretary Clinton. And now to my third point, to complete the circle, who is Cheryl Mills?
Counselor and Chief of Staff to the Secretary.
And she was copied on that email that I know my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are going to have a press conference on as soon as we get out of here, calling on the State Department to release this email. I know it, because I have heard all afternoon about denying access to documents, and they do not want to deny the public or the media access to this document. So I know they're going to call on the State Department to release this non-classified email, which Cheryl Mills was copied on, which demonstrably undercuts Susan Rice's talking points. And Cheryl Mills was copied on that email.
Mr. Gowdy, if I could add, Cheryl Mills was also the person that led our preparation for our October testimony. I'd never met her before, but that was explained to me who she was afterwards.
And apparently, she was also less than pleased with Mr. Chaffetz's visit to Libya, if I understood that testimony correctly, which I find stunning. He's a subcommittee chairman on oversight, one of the more decent human beings I've ever met. I've never known him to inspire that strong of emotion in anyone other than Ms. Mills. Let me say this to you, Ambassador, in conclusion. You have made a compelling case today for why it is important to tell other countries the truth. You made a compelling case that the decision not to tell the truth on Sunday morning talk shows adversely impacted our ability to get to Benghazi. You made a compelling case. All three of you have made a compelling case today on why it is important for government to tell the truth to its own citizens. So you made the case why we have to tell the truth to other countries, and you made the case on why you have to tell the truth to your own citizens. So if anyone wants to know what difference does it make, if anyone wants to ask what difference does it make, it always matters whether or not you can trust your government. And to the families, we're going to find out what happened in Benghazi, and I don't give a damn whose career is impacted. We're going to find out what happened. And with that, I would yield back.
Would the gentleman yield?
I'll be happy to.
We're going to be winding down. There's a vote call, but I want to ask each of you, you're whistleblowers. You're the kind of people that give us information we wouldn't otherwise have. Do you believe what you're doing today is what we need to keep doing? In other words, do we need other whistleblowers to come forward, other fact witnesses who know what we don't currently know? And I'm not asking you to ask if this was a great process or you enjoyed it, but was it worthwhile, in your opinion, as people who have now gone through this process? Mr. Thompson?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hicks?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Nordstrom?
Absolutely.
Well, since we're going to Mr. Langford next, I hope you continue to feel that way. Mr. Langford.
Mr. Nordstrom, I just need to follow up on a conversation we had earlier dealing with the cable that you said March the 28th, 2012. You had mentioned that you drafted that cable requesting additional personnel for both the embassy in Tripoli and in Benghazi because you were very much short. And as time was expiring and the SST team were leaving, you knew you were not going to have enough people. You mentioned you drafted the cable. Your intention was and your assumption was the executive leadership, including the Undersecretary all the way to the Secretary, would see that cable or at least be briefed on that cable and the request for that security. There's been a lot of discussion about the official response that came back on April the 19th. Who do you think saw or the intention or at least reflected the opinion of when that cable came back to you? When that cable response came back to you, who was the assumption that was actually responding to you?
Normally, someone would tell me exactly who it is, or they would indicate who the point of contact was. If I recall correctly, that's still unknown to me. I assume that it's coming from DS, but as I testified to before, so many of these decisions seem to be at Ambassador Kennedy's level or higher. Clearly, that was cleared by some of those other officials.
All right, so you're assuming this is the Undersecretary or on up somewhere that had personal knowledge of that.
Certainly saw it ahead of time.
Of that cable that came back. It is an established fact that there is video of the attack. There are clear video of the attackers the night. The FBI has done an extensive investigation. We're now months past that time. Are any of you aware of anyone who has been held to account for the murders that happened in Libya? Anyone detained, anyone arrested, anyone captured? Are you aware of anything that has happened to any of the attackers to hold them to account?
Neither the perpetrators nor the persons that made decisions. Again, the 4 people that were named in the ARB were put on administrative leave. I understand one of them is trying to come back off of that leave and go to be the RSO in NATO, which is shocking to me.
So at this point, no one is aware of anyone who's been held to account in any way for the murder of 4 Americans?
Not that I'm aware of.
In 1998, we've discussed frequently, there was the bombing of the embassy in Kenya and Tanzania. There was an ARB at the end of that as well. And let me just read you the 3 findings at the end of that ARB that was done in 1999. It said this: number 1, State Department of Washington did not assess the threats or take notes of the clear warning signs and escalating threats. Number 2, it noted the facility was inadequate for even the most modest of attack. And number 3, there was a lack of preparations or warning systems at the facility. That could have been written a month ago. We have discussed often on this. The one thing we have to do is learn the lesson. In 1998, the same thing occurred, and we have not learned the lesson. What we know of today, and the realities that have come out and through all that you have contributed to this conversation, and what you've contributed is invaluable, is that we did not do the most basic minimum security that was required by the State Department standards set after the bombings in Nairobi, Kenya, and in Tanzania. We did not do the basics. We did not provide the level of security. There were, in fact, cameras that were in the box still in Benghazi because the technical person had never been sent to actually install those, and so there could have been additional warning signs, but they had not actually been installed and done. We know that the Tripoli facility was even at a greater risk than Benghazi. There were even more vulnerabilities in Tripoli than there were at Benghazi's, both in physical security around the facility and in actual staffing of people that are the gun toters, as you mentioned before, the door kickers and such, people that would actually be there to be able to provide that security. The minimum level was not provided. In fact, my understanding, Mr. Hicks, is that it reached such a point of vulnerability that you actually approached some of the diplomatic security and asked for the diplomats to be trained in how to handle a gun because there was such a fear of the people on the ground because you were so exposed. Is that true?
That's true.
We have got to learn the lessons of the past. This happened in 1998. We allowed it to happen again. The State Department has to put into practice their own standards and put into place the things we know to be right. We cannot allow a place that's listed as critical and high risk to our personnel to be ignored and to not have the support they need. If there's any one gain that we can do in any one way to be able to honor those that have fallen is that we actually do learn the lesson and we protect our diplomats with what is required. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. We now go to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mica. Mr. Hicks, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, I'd just like to make a clarification with respect to conversation with the ranking member. There's no inherent contradiction between denying or avoiding a private interview with someone and making sure that he has information available. I just want to be clear on that.
Mr. Mica.
Thank you. Mr. Nordstrom, I don't think I've ever read so much testimony, but what you provided last night I thought was particularly informative. And talking about on page 7, you talk about the rating level assigned for threat categories for our various posts. And there are 4 of them: critical, high, medium, and low.